Okay, today I'm going to show you how to create an analogous yellow painting. These are peaches, and I'm using lemon yellow, cad-free yellow at the upper left. The cad-free yellow is on the right, and the bottom center is Windsor red, or you can use cad-free red. And those are the colors that I use to mix up the orange color, and then by adding a little bit more water, I get my yellow orange. And here's my palette with my mixes. I've got the lemon yellow, cad-free yellow, orange mixture, and the Windsor red mixture on the right. So as you can see, I marked off my image area to the right, and I'm creating my palette to the left. I think it's a good idea to either create your palette to the left of your painting or in a notebook. It's always good to refer to your color mixes when you're thinking about value and saturation and the colors that you want to use in your painting. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm very lightly laying in a sketch of the image area. I'm using a very light wash of the lemon yellow. It's a very thin wash, and I'm just placing the peaches where I want them to be in the image area, and then I'll just do light indications of the fabric that the peaches are on. Now you can work from a live still life or you can work from a photo. Either way, keep in mind that you have the creative ability to manipulate your images. You can decide what colors you want in or don't want in. Because this is an analogous color example, I didn't put in the blue stripes in the towel, but if it was going to be a complementary color assignment, then that would be a great opportunity to bring in that little bit of blue. But for now, we're just going to work with the mixes of yellow, yellow, orange, and orange. So what I'm doing, this is watercolor, so I'm putting in a very, very light wash of the lemon yellow. So I've thinned out the lemon yellow and put a light wash with the two in the peach on the left and a light wash of the lemon yellow in the peach on the right. The middle peach is in the background. It has more saturation and it's also in shadow. These peaches are backlit. There's light coming in from the window, and you can see where the light is hitting the back right side of that middle peach. It does catch the front edge of the peach and the two peaches in the foreground. It does catch a little bit of light in there. So right now I'm putting in a little bit of the yellow orange very lightly, and the paper's still a little bit wet, so you're going to get a little bit of a wet on wet blurring. I'm going in with a little bit of extra water at the top of that peach to soften that top edge. And you can see how just adding that water, how it just softens that left side of the peach. However, that is in shadow, so I'm going to go back in with a little bit deeper yellow orange, closer to the orange color. And here you can see how the wet on wet works nicely for this subject matter. If you put too much pigment on the paper, you can always wet your brush, rinse it, dry it, and pick up the extra pigment with your brush. So now I'm putting in the shadow area of the peach on the right hand side. I'm allowing a little bit of extra uh, painting area for the cast shadow under that peach. That's why that edge is not completely rounded. And I'm going in to put in the little navel part of the peach where the stem attaches. Now that navel looked a little bit dark. I started with a deep orange, and then to lighten up that a little bit, I just added water and then lifted up some of the pigment. So if you want to blend from dark to light, you could put your darker color in and then just add a little water, and that's what I'm doing here, and then pick up that extra water. And that's how you will get more of a blended value. Putting the dark shadow area of the navel of the peach in at first is very helpful to kind of delineate the plane changes on the peach. It's helping to kind of define the direction that the peach is turned toward. So now I'm going into the fabric, and I'm just putting a very, very light shadow in that fabric. This is a tone of the lemon yellow, and the way I created a tone for the shadows in the fabric is I took the lemon yellow mixture, a very light watered down mixture, and then I added violet. So I added a mixture of a very little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and that gave me a very light violet. And by mixing the violet with the lemon yellow, that's giving me this warm gray for the shadow area. And that's called a tone. So when you take a color, and in this case I took the yellow, and you mix the opposite of that color, which is violet, the violet is across from yellow on the color wheel. When you mix that with the yellow, you will get a tone of that yellow. Now, if you took black and mixed it with the yellow, you would get a tint. However, it's possible with black, mixing it with yellow, you may get a green color, which is not uncommon because black does have some blue in it. So when I work with the shadow areas of my objects, I like to use tones and not shades. I don't like to use black. So I'm going into the right side of this peach, and I'm adding the cad-free yellow in combination with the orange to bring in more saturation in that side of the peach. Now in real life, these peaches look very bright and colorful. When they're photographed, there's going to be a coolness. Most photographs are cooled down a little bit. They don't look like the original setup. So these peaches may have a little bit more of a cool tone to them in the photograph. So keep that in mind if you're working from a photograph and not from light. You want to warm up your colors a bit. So it looks like I've got my light side of my peaches in, and I've got the dark side of the peaches. I'll have to do a little bit more on the dark side on the peach in the right hand side. And right now I'm just putting in cast shadows, just working in the shadow area with the tone. And if I want that tone, that shadow tone area to be a little bit darker, then I just can add a little bit more pigment. So to darken that shadow area, all I did was add a little bit more orange, and then to that orange, the mixture of the alizarin and the ultramarine blue violet mixture, and that made that shadow a little bit more saturation in there. Now I think that shadow was a little bit too heavy, so I'm going to add some water and value in there and just clean it up. If you put too much color or too much pigment in an image area, just dip your brush in the water and then go in and add the water to the paint. Do this within 24 hours before it sets up in the paper, and then you can lift that color with your paintbrush. Now I'm going into the background area. I'm going to try to keep the background lighter, the tones lighter in the background, and more saturated in the foreground. So the goal is to have more contrast in the foreground, and that will bring your eye to the foreground. Where you have the greatest contrast is where you're going to have the eye will be drawn, and that will become your focal point. Now what this is called modeling the form. I'm going into the right side of the peach, and I'm adding another value on top of the very light yellow. Some of that yellow has dried, so this is called glazing. So when you go in on top of another color, a light color with another wash, this is called, you call that glazing. So I am going into the shadow areas and adding another pass of watercolor just to cause, to help model the form to create that three-dimensional appearance. So I'm looking closely at how can I define those plane changes. As I look at that peach on the left, there's a plane change all around the peach. You have the top and then the three-dimensional plane that moves into the center of the navel area and then back out and around the peach. Right now I'm working wet in wet in the shadow area of that foreground peach to the right, and my goal there is to have a very soft shadow. So you have to just do that very gently, and I'll pick up any excess. Going in with just another pass of the orange in the background. background, and that throws that center peach to the background. So now we're down to the refinement stage of the painting. I have the large shapes in, and now I'll just go in and pick up any excess paint where there's too much saturation. The light is hitting the top of those peaches. And then I can also go into some of those areas uh, with Chinese white. So that's what I'm doing here is I'm going in with Chinese white to lighten the top edge of that peach in the foreground. And I'm going to do that same with the peach in the background. Just hitting the top edges of those peaches with the Chinese white just to soften the top edge. That's something that can really create form is lost and found edges. Whenever you have a hard edge on an object, it can flatten that image. So I'm just going in and trying to soften the top edge of that middle peach and the peach on the right with some Chinese white. Just give it that sense that the light is hitting the top of that peach. And I'm going in with the Chinese white just to hit some highlights where the light is hitting the top rim of the navel of the peach. You can blend that in with the yellow orange, soften that core shadow there. Here I'm checking all my values. I'm noticing that center peach in the background is a little bit darker. So I'm going to go in and darken that. And those subtle value changes will help to uh, throw that peach to the background and really create that three-dimensional space. And so this last 5 to 10 minutes is pretty much refinement. So you start with your large shapes, you put in your large shapes, which can happen pretty quickly. And then the end of the last 25% of the painting is just working on subtle refinements. Now I was trying to really make the top right edge of that peach in the front stand out, and I realized the best way to do it was to put in uh, a background, a darker background. Keep in mind your lights will only be as light as your darks are dark.